Welcome to Dalma Makes. This project was inspired by one of my favorite paintings, Starry Sky by Vincent van Gogh. This is technically an upcycling project, as this glass jar with the threaded lid used to house a scented candle, and instead of throwing it away, I transformed it into something beautiful and hopefully useful. I had these tiny laser cut buildings, and I wondered if I could somehow attach them to the outside of the jar. Of course, they would need a background, so I looked through my stash and I found this really beautiful pattern paper that reminded me of the Starry Sky painting with the swirls in the sky. And at that point, I was just completely inspired to kind of recreate a version of it. I only had this one sheet of paper though, so I had to somehow make it work. And to do that, I cut out some strips for the upper half of the jar and glued them on with some gel matte medium. Now, the fact that it's not one continuous strips and their seams is not going to be a problem, as I'm going to find ways to hide the imperfections. I wanted to adorn the lid as well, but I didn't want to do too much to it. I wanted to preserve functionality and I wanted it to remain a flat lid so that something else can be placed on top, as the jar hopefully will see some utility. So I'm adding the dimensional element to the edge of the lid. I had this beaded trim from something, I don't remember. And I'm just gluing it on with hot glue, as the lid is made out of plastic. Once glued on and set, I am painting it with some black acrylic paint. I also painted the top of the lid that I previously sanded a little bit, and I attached this beautiful filigree laser cut out of paper, and instead of glue I'm just using the acrylic paint as an adhesive, just as a little bit of a shortcut. When the glue is dried on the pattern paper, it's time to add my miniature village. Because those buildings were cut out of wood, they are perfectly rigid, and there was absolutely no way for me to curve them around the shape of the jar. I decided to use some air dry clay to sort of bulk out the jar and fill in the spaces between the buildings. So my system is to lay down a layer of the air dry clay, add some PVA glue to the back of the little buildings, and then kind of sculpt and shape and cut away the excess from above the buildings, as I want it to look like a skyline. Obviously, the clay will also fill in the windows and doors, but I'm trying my best not to press too hard so that there is still a dimensional indentation. This took me quite a while, but I skipped through most of it as it's not that interesting to watch. And here's a close-up of it once it's dry. The next step was to cover all the white clay with a dark brown paint, and I'm really focusing on covering the edges and the insides of the indentations and everything, just so if anything is missed during the painting process later, there won't be any white peeking through rather a dark brown, which works as a shadow. While that base coat is drying, I'm turning my attention to the lid and I'm laying down a dark blue color that matches in tone the pattern paper I used. And I think I did a couple of coats of this. I wanted the windows to look like the lights were on in the evening, so I picked a really nice bright yellow to paint in all those tiny windows. And I did this with a very fine brush, very carefully, just lighting up those windows one by one. Honestly, I think this took me about an hour and a half to do, but I was listening an audiobook and it was a nice and relaxing time. Of course, my version of the Starry Sky village is a lot more cartoony. That's okay, as I'm not trying to transpose exactly the painting to different medium. I'm just inspired by it. After all the tiny bright windows, I'm going to paint some of the doors and some of the roofs and other architectural details on some of the buildings. I'm going to use mostly warm colors, lots of different shades of brown, some reds, maroons, I think even a little bit of olive green, but I'm purposely avoiding blue just so I can preserve that contrast with the starry sky. After all the little details are done, I'm using my finger and sort of dry brushing a really warm white kind of all over the buildings to lighten them up, and I really like the weathered look that makes. And to seal in my paintings and warm up all the colors, I'm going to use my trusty yellow shellac ink. This is a wonderful varnish and also a nice warm wash over everything. And it's often one of my favorite steps in any project as it's so satisfying. While that shellac ink dries, I'm going to continue painting the lid. I'm going to use a couple of different blues. I made sure that they each match a specific color from the pattern paper I used. And I'm just using a finger instead of a brush, just so that I can feel the texture and not press too hard and bring out that beautiful filigree and the texture on that beaded trim, adding it in really thin layers, just softly gliding over, not pressing at all. To create some continuity from the lid, I'm going to add a little bit of that last blue to the very top of the jar. I think that gives it a nice finish at the top. And here's a little close-up of what I've got so far. Now, to actually make the sky starry, I've decided to use this confetti. They are golden colored, but they also have this color shifting holographic thing going on. And I've selected exactly one moon and lots of tiny stars in different shapes and sizes. And I'm gluing them with glossy accents, as the confetti is a very slippery surface and I worried that PVA glue wouldn't hold. With all those golden stars and moon, I decided to add even a little bit more gold to the project, and I just rubbed some gold onto the lid, as I did see it as an abstract continuation of the sky. And of course, I couldn't stop myself, and I added some gold to the base of the jar as well. And I think it's okay. And I realized that I kind of do this to everything nowadays, but I just can't stop. The painting Starry Sky famously has these cypress trees in the foreground, and I had this preserved moss that I think kinda looks like maybe miniature cypress trees, kind of. And I decided to add them all over the tiny village, some to look like they're behind the houses, and some to look like they're planted right in between, but in any case, strategically hiding those seams from the pattern paper, and also hiding any sculpting mistakes or paint splatter or anything else that I wasn't exactly happy with. And the adhesive of choice was hot glue for this part of the project, as it was the best tool for the job. Adding green things to my projects always makes me so happy, and I love the dimensionality of it as well. Also, the little clumps remained quite soft to the touch, and softness is quite a rare texture in my projects, so I really value it for that purpose. When all that is done, this is what I ended up with. I had a lot of fun working on this project, and it felt good to rescue yet another jar. I'm not sure what I'll use it for, but for now it can just look really pretty on my shelf. I would love to hear your thoughts on this project. Please do voice them in the comments. And also, maybe you could share with me which one is your favorite Vincent van Gogh painting. If you'd like to see more of what I make, please consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you for watching. I hope you're having a nice day. Bye.